Hello there, my name is Martin Henley. This is the Effective Marketing Company YouTube channel. And if you've spent a second here, you will know already that this channel is all about giving you everything you need to be successful in your business. Now, as far as I'm aware, the only way for you to be successful in your business is to be successful with your sales and marketing. So not only am I here giving you everything I know about sales and marketing, I am pulling in literally anyone I can find to share their experience of sales and marketing with you, with a view to giving you what you need to be successful in your business. So I meant to count before we did this. We must be getting really close to episode number 50. It must be really close. This is either going to be episode 48, 49 or 50, I think. But I haven't counted, so we don't know. So that's typical. My phone has just started ringing, so let's decline that. Today's guest has search engine optimization experience going back to 2009. So that's 13 years of search engine optimization experience. That's quite a lot. He is currently busy with 6 roles all around SEO and e-commerce, including a couple of search engine optimization tools. He is the author of The Organic Advantage. He speaks about SEO, digital marketing, and e-commerce. He's going to speak to us today about search engine optimization. He is an ex-cage fighter. Today's guest is Martin Hayman. Hello, Martin.
Hello, Martin.
You're the second Martin to appear on the Talk Marketing Show. It's the only other one is me. How are you doing, man? Are you good?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, good.
Excellent. Thank you so much for agreeing to spend this time. I understand you are having a hectic time. We first scheduled this, I think, way back in, was it last year sometime we first scheduled this?
I think we first started talking last year and then we scheduled it a month or two ago, yeah.
Okay, and here we are. So in the bat of an eye, here we are having a conversation. You've got a lot on. You've got these 6 things that you're busy with. You launched a tool last week, so there's quite a lot to talk about, I think. Where do we start? You know there's only 5 questions. So the questions are, how are you qualified to talk to us about search engine optimization? Who do you work with? How do you add value to their lives? What is your recommendation for people who want to do better with search engine optimization? What should people read? And is there anyone you can throw under the bus who might agree to have a conversation like this with me? So question number 1, how are you, Martin Hayman, qualified to talk to us about search engine optimization?
Well, I suppose the main thing is experience. So as you mentioned, I've been in the game for about 13 years. So back in around 2007, I was in the wonderful world of IT, and I just started an IT support company, ventured out on my own in 2007, just as that big recession hit. So I was going out and doing sales and marketing for the first time, and everyone was cutting their marketing budgets, especially around kind of IT support and things like that. So it was a bit of a struggle from day one, really. But that ticked over for a couple of years. And towards the end of that journey, I started getting into SEO. So I didn't really know what it was back in 2007. And I was working in shared offices with an SEO agency, a small agency, and they put on a couple of little seminars for people in the building. And it seemed like a bit of a dark art back then. And, I thought it was just kind of a flick a switch and it's done. So I learned a lot from them and started building my own sites and having a bit of a play. And then when that business kind of came to its end, I then started working for a media business as in an SEO role. And it's kind of been just SEO since that day. And I've had a good mixture of roles as well. So I've worked client side within a media business like that. So they had about 80 website properties, I think they owned. And I think about 20 of those were market leaders. And then I moved over to an agency. So I've had experience of agency side as well, working with, anything from very small businesses up to larger international sites like Cheap Flights and TUI and things like that. And I just kind of bounced a little bit between in-house an agency, because I went back to the media agency after that, and I started off heading up an agency that they had started, and then their head of global SEO moved to Japan, so they asked me to fill his role, and I started heading up SEO for the whole group. And yeah, going back about 5 years ago from now, something like that, I then ventured out on my own and started freelancing. But then I started building a bit of a team around me, so that kind of transitioned into what today is WildSprout.
Okay, cool.
And then also other projects have kind of spawned off of that as well, which we can talk about.
Okay, super cool. So you didn't know what it was in 2007. I don't think people know what it is in 2022.
No, a lot don't. It confuses a lot of people. So I still have conversations where people, they know it's something they need and they've been told that it's something they should be doing, but they don't understand it. They don't know what it's involved, and that's where problems arise on things like how much it costs and things like that. Because I don't think people realise how much cost investment is involved, how much time investment is involved, because it isn't just a flick a switch. There's a lot more to it than that.
Yes. Okay, good. So I tell people, I teach digital marketing, and there's always like an SEO component. So I tell people that this is the deepest, darkest secret of marketing. And then I tell them exactly what I think they need to know in about 4.5 minutes. So obviously I'm not telling them exactly what it is, but that is something about this, which is everyone wants to be at the top of Google. Nobody knows what it involves. Everybody wants to be at the top of Google for something that's not particularly useful to them. So maybe we should just have that conversation about what it actually is and how it actually works. And so if somebody watches this and comes and asks you to help them, they don't get a shock when you tell them it costs however many tens of thousands of pounds you'd like to be charging them.
Yeah, I think a really simple way of putting it is when you search something on Google and you get those results, you often see ads at the top. Not always, but you often see ads. They're quite clearly marked with ad. Now you can pay to get there, so that's pay per click. You can pay to get there, and that's obviously there's a skill and an art involved in how to best optimize that.
Yep.
But you can pay to be there, so it's a lot simpler if you've got the budget. But some searches are more expensive than others. Organic search is what comes underneath that. You don't have much control over that. That's Google's decision or their algorithm's decision. But there are things you can do to optimize your website to rank higher there. And the two main elements of that are on-site and off-site. So the on-site being, is your website technically sound? Is it fast enough? Is your structure good enough? Is it easy for Google to crawl? What does the architecture look like? Is the internal linking good? What is your content like? Is that optimized for terms the way it should be? So there's a lot of on-site elements there, content being a huge one. And then there's the off-site. So who is linking to you? Because if you've got a great website, but you haven't got any backlinks, no one's linking to your site, you're going to struggle. At the same time, if you've got a load of backlinks, you've got a terrible site with terrible content, you're going to struggle. So those two things need to really work together. And you're competing with other companies that are doing the same thing, and it's about who can create the better content, the better site structure, get the better backlinks to try and kind of outdo the competition. I think that's the simplest way I can probably put it.
No, that's a really good way of putting it. I was a little bit worried when you started because I've heard so many terrible definitions of what SEO is and how you actually do it. It's just, it's like people really don't understand this. So what's interesting is that this is a moving feast. Like it has evolved enormously since 2007. So, and you say the ads are quite pronounced. They are much less pronounced than they were in 2007.
Mm.
So there's something in this about you being at the top of the natural or the organic results isn't really how Google makes its money. Do you know what I mean? So Google doesn't necessarily have an interest in anyone being there. So there's two things that I want to talk about. I want to talk about how it's evolved. I want to talk about how there's not just one search engine. When you get onto the search engine results page, you are typically looking at 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 search engines. So like you say, you've got the ads, so that's a search engine. Then below that, you might have the local business results, you might have video results, you might have image results, and then you might have the organic. And now they've got like the snippet results, so they don't necessarily even want you leaving the page. So there's a lot I think about that. I don't know what the question was, like which way. So let's go with that. Like how has the service that you've delivered evolved to kind like with that changing with the changing look of the search engine's results page?
Yeah, I guess there's two things I can talk about here. One is how the search results have evolved, and second is like what we do these days that is different, because it was very different what we would do back then. So back in kind of 2009, it was so much easier to rank. Just optimize things correctly, pop keywords on the page, make sure it was on there enough. And in terms of link building, I was doing all sorts like directory submissions, social bookmarking, article spinning. So, we'd be parts of networks where you could spin an article. So you get 1,000 versions of this one article, and then you pop it out to the network. So you get 1,000 links like that. And it helped. And then obviously Google released Penguin and Panda algorithms to tackle poor content and links. And sites that were doing a lot of that took some nosedives, and it put some people out of business because they were doing a bit too much of that.
Yeah.
So the way things work has changed a lot. The way things are now is how I think people just need to be thinking about things going forward. So now people, even kind of black hats, have now got to a point where they realize, okay, I do need good content. I do need really great content that actually competes with what else is on page one. I do actually need good quality backlinks. And, some people still use grey tactics, but in general, people are even black and grey hats are doing a lot more digital PR and things like that, because they know they need higher quality. So, and I think that will be the way things go for quite some time. So things have change in terms of the way you do things, but yes, the search results have changed a lot as well, and it's stuff we need to think about too. So, for example, you mentioned the ads were a lot more prominent, or a lot more obvious. It was ads back then,
Yes.
and they've tried to dumb that down. So they still need to make it clear it's ads, because legally they have to do that. But it is a bit more subtle, because that's how they make their money. They want people clicking on those ads. But some people who are a bit more savvy, you probably do it as well. I bypass those ads a lot of time, because I know people have paid to get there. I want to see what's ranking naturally. I'll just go down to the organic results and start having a look at some of those. Because from my point of view, it's not people that are paying to get there. It's people that have got good websites, good content, and people are referencing them. They've got relevant backlinks from probably decent sources. So I want to look at those results. So although paid has its place, and obviously, if it didn't work, Google wouldn't do it, and they wouldn't be, the multi-billion-dollar company they are. But organic is so important, because you can't just rely on paid, because it gets expensive, and some people just bypass those and click on organic results. Then, as you say, there's all these other elements that have been introduced now as well. So if you're a local business, you don't just need to think about paid and organic. You need to think about the map pack as well, the local pack rankings. So you get those 3 local rankings, and then a click through for more results, and you kind of get your map results. So there's other ways you need to think about ranking for those as well. So some of that is the same as how you would rank for organic, but some of it is a bit different as well. So you need to think a bit more about citation links and things like that. And then there's other things like featured snippets. So there's a lot of studies and conversations in more recent years about zero-click results. So things like, if you're searching for what is the time in Singapore, now you wouldn't click on a result in a website now, because Google give you that answer. And even things like jobs and flights, if you start looking for flights to Madrid, Google starts showing you flight results, and they're trying to keep you in Google more and more.
Yes.
And a lot of that has changed. So there's a whole thing about zero-click results, and obviously some people are a bit funny about it because they're using other people's content but keeping them on Google and not driving them to the source. So there's things like that, but there are huge opportunities as well with things like featured snippets. So there's tools you can use to see the keywords you're ranking for, which of those actually show feature snippets. So kind of answer cards and things like that at the top of the results. Position 0, we sometimes call them. Which keywords show featured snippet results, and especially if you're already ranking on page 1 for that term, they are often results that you can grab. You can kind of steal those results. So there's a lot of other elements that you need to think about these days rather than just page and organic. Can we grab that featured snippet? Can we get star reviews in our results? We've got recipe pages. Can we start showing recipe snippets? So there's all these other kind of schema markup and snippets we can show as well. So like you say, it's not just page and organic anymore.
No. Good. I'm going to struggle to keep up because, it's been quite a long time since I was really invested in this. I'll tell you, so you're using language like white hat, grey hat, black hat. I know what you mean, but people who are listening may not know what you mean. What do you mean?
Yeah, that's probably evolved a bit as well. But in general, black hat is often termed as people who are using really shady, sometimes even illegal tactics. So that might be things like, one old tactic was, this might not mean a lot to a lot of people, but SAPE links, which were like Russian hacked links. So you could get thousands of links using kind of these SAPE tools. Hacked link edits. So some people will hack WordPress websites and just pop your link in there. So there's all these kind of shady tactics where people just ramp up their links to get just to boost your backlinks from potentially high quality sites, but not necessarily a legit way. Grey hat is more, decent links, but not necessarily abiding by Google's terms of service. So that might be in some of the ways you go about getting guest posting, and you have a lot of control over the links. It's a great way to do link building, but it's not necessarily what Google want you to be doing, but a lot of people do it. So there may be kind of like gray areas. You're creating great content, you're giving it to a genuine site. So it's kind of, it's a good way of link building. You're not really doing anything wrong. It's just marketing. You just want to get some content on their site talking about your service or what you do with maybe a link. But having control over that anchor text could term it as grey hat. White hat is when you do everything naturally. So, you're abiding by Google's terms of service. That's things like digital PR, where you're just promoting things and outreaching to journalists and so on. And if they want to post something, they want to link to you, they choose the link. It's all kind of a lot more natural. I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, so it goes back to the cowboy westerns, doesn't it? Which were in black and white in the 50s, and we knew the guy was bad because he had a black hat on, and we knew the guy was good because he had a white hat on, and so the grey are somewhere in between. People are fascinated by this. Immediately, you show people exactly what I mean. So when I teach SEO, I have to have this conversation with them. This is bad, this is good, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what you're not. And when I've stopped teaching them, it's like 3 hours it's a half a day or something, then they all want to cheat the system. So that's what we call black hat SEO, is where you find a way to cheat Google to get to the top of the search engines. So I want to do like a little bit of the history, because there's this famous story about BMW, wasn't there? So there was a time when what you had to do if you wanted to rank is have the keywords on the pages just more than anyone else. So BMW reportedly wrote the keyword, wherever it was, BMW car, on their pages, the same color as the background, thousands of times. And this managed to get them to rank. And then, so reportedly, they got delisted for that, like taken off the rankings. Um, there was a time, I don't know. So here's what I want to talk about. I used to say to people, SEO is a long term, long return investment. So basically, you are going to invest some time and energy, like mainly time, like weeks and months and maybe years to get to the very top of the search engine. But once you are there, clearly it's hugely beneficial and you might be there for a period of time. But this is before the major algorithms happened and they shook things up dramatically. So, what do I want to say about? So, for example, there was one of the algorithms was about thin sites. So, for a long period of time, the most important place to have your keywords was in your domain. So, if you had your keywords in your domain, if it was marketingpodcast.com, then there was a chance I would just rank off the back of that. So, we had a customer and we created like 60 landing pages, bought 60 domains. He was converting cars to run on LPG. So it'd be like Land Rover LPG, Van LPG, Toyota Highlander 4x4 LPG, all of these things. And they were ranking beautifully and doing great for his business. And then literally whichever one of these algorithms it was, Penguin or one of those, did away with that. And all these sites went away overnight. What's the point of it? The point of this is that this is a moving feast always. It's not, it is like you say, it's competitive. It's just, can you do better than your competitors? How do you,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I think a lot of people have done things like that to try and game the system, like you say. So I know of an example. So I think there's a couple of different updates you've mentioned there. So one is Panda, which was targeting poor quality content.
yep,
So a lot of sites that had loads of thin content, maybe duplicate content, it was just copied from elsewhere. Sites like that, so kind of your eHouse and things like that. A lot of those sites got hit really hard. There was another big one that really got hammered, and I can't remember the name of it now. But some sites got absolutely annihilated because their content was either copied from elsewhere or really thin, just really poor quality. So Panda dealt with a lot of that. Then there was around the same time or a little bit after, there was also the EMD update, so the exact match domain update. And I know of a site, they had a nice brandable name. It did have kind of a partial keyword in there to do with what they did, but the other half of it was just a nice kind of brandable, unique word. And they wanted to, I don't know if I can mention the site, but they wanted to switch to an exact match domain. So they switched to X, what the thing was, forsale.com. And initially they saw a really nice uplift, but then this exact match domain update got released and they plummeted. And they ended up having to switch back to their brandable domain, which ended up helping them, but it was a struggle and it took a long time. Now, some people still swear by exact match domains, especially for smaller, less competitive websites or maybe even local websites. Now, I think the reason sometimes it can still work versus not working is what this example site I'm talking about did was they already had an established brand. All of their backlinks, their branded backlinks were this brand name. And then they suddenly switched to this keyword domain and started building these exact match keyword anchors. Doing it that way, I don't think would work these days. If you've got a really good branded name, I would definitely not switch to an EMD these days. But if you're starting from scratch, I would still opt for something brandable because I think it's just it's much better from a backlinking perspective. You can kind of build; it's easy to build links to that brand, whereas you've got to be careful building links using exact match keyword anchors because that's something else that can go against you as well. So I know of sites before that have really hammered backlinks with exact match anchors to a certain category page, and then again, around the time of Google's Penguin update, which was targeting spammy backlinks, those types of pages got hit really hard because it's just too unnatural and heavy on the exact match anchors. So I think EMDs still have their place, but I would always opt for something branded. but they can still work, and I do still see people testing them and saying, yeah, this has worked really well for me.
Yeah, so I think it probably still works. I mean, so maybe we'll talk about on page. So the number one place you want to have your keywords is in your domain or your URL. Um, but I think what has to happen now is you have to build the site and the content around it. So before, I think you're right, it was Panda. It was literally, if you had a page with the exact keywords in your domain, you were getting there or thereabouts with that on its own, you know. So I think that's the difference. So Panda was the Penguin was the links. Penguin was the one that attacked the links. Okay. So before that happened, I had an SEO client. So I don't know when this was, 2011, 2012. Literally, the way his sales process worked is somebody would phone him up and they'd say, we want to rank at the top of Google for car insurance. And he'd say, okay, great. And he'd do the search and see who was ranking in first position. And then he had a tool which would tell them how many links they had. So it would be like they've got 4.5 million links. And it would literally be a case of you need more than 4.5 million links. And so that's going to take this period of time, and this is going to cost you this amount of money. And then the clients would either have the money or not. If they wanted to be top for car insurance, they probably would. And then they would become a customer, and they'd build them the more. Then by the time they got there, it might be 5 million links. But this is what it was all based on. So now, since it's Panda, Penguin, it's confused, whichever one it was. So since then, it's been more about the quality of those links than the quantity. At that time, it was all about the quantity. The point is, the reason I want to go through this is because I think if people understand the history of how it got to where it is, then I think maybe they come to understand a little bit about the work involved. So what that did essentially is it outlawed this volume of really shoddy links, and then people were penalized for having those links. So I often say to people that Google is a little bit like God. It knows if you've been good, it knows if you've been bad. You know, we are all sacrificing our virgins to Google to build these links, create this content. But also, it can damn you retrospectively. So literally, up until that day, this is how everyone did search engine optimization. From that day onwards, it was black hat and immoral to do that, and it punished people retrospectively. So for years, people were in the business of cleaning up what they called these toxic links. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think I can talk a bit about that. So people were having to do a lot of cleanups. There were a lot of disavows, if you remember. They don't happen as much now, but people still do them. So there are a lot of disavows happening. So the way it worked initially with Penguin is more often than not, if you were doing really shady stuff, you would get punished. So you would have a kind of manual penalty. You'd then have to start setting up a disavow file of all the links you want to ignore. You'd have to outreach to them officially first to say, please remove this link. Then you'd have to submit that disavow file and try and get a reconsideration request done. And then Google would either say, no, you need to do a bit more, or yeah, okay, fine, we're going to let you back into the search results. So there are all these manual penalties happening. Then quite a few years later, I think it was Penguin version 4 was released, and Google decided that they were going to be given less manual penalties and they were going to be ignoring more links. So they got a lot better at just ignoring the rubbish links. So these days it's more a case of, you might be building all these links, but you don't really know what's being ignored. Some of them Google might just go, no, that's rubbish, we're ignoring that. You won't necessarily get a manual penalty, but it is all about quality now. So, so I can't remember where I was going with that.
No, you're saying so that situation passed, and eventually they forgave those sinners who'd spent all that time and all that money building all those millions of links. I think the point I want to make is that,
Yeah, I was just going to say it's not uncommon these days to see. You were speaking about the 4.5 million example. It's not uncommon these days to see a site with 500 referring domains outranking something with 20,000 referring domains,
Yeah.
because when you actually dig into those 20,000 referring domains, there's a lot of crap in there.
Yes.
Whereas the one with 500 referring domains, a lot of those are natural. A lot of them that have been built have been focused on quality. So the overall quality is just a lot better. And obviously, there's a lot of other elements. There's the on-site elements. There's even the anchor text distribution of those links coming in.
Yes.
And some of it from those 20,000 might be a bit too over optimized, a bit too keyword heavy, or no keyword anchors at all. So it's actually not really telling Google much. So there's all these other elements at play, but it isn't really. It's rarely about the numbers these days. Obviously, the more the better if they're high quality.
Yep.
But yeah, it's not uncommon to see sites with a lot less links outranking ones with more. So don't look at a competitor and think, oh God, they've got 50,000 referring domains, I've got to get the same, because you don't necessarily.
No, I think obviously you know much better than I do, but it seems to be much more about the quality. I want to talk about the value of this and how dirty this black hat can be, because if you are ranking, I think this is the other misconception. People think if I rank for this one keyword, that's going to be everything. The mission is to rank for tens, if not hundreds of keywords. Is that... Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got a good example of this. So I used to do some work for a company in the sports industry, and they had a keyword they really wanted to go after, and it had a category for this keyword, and they were always pushing about this. I think it was it was around like page 3 of Google or something, and then it went up to page 2, but page 1 was really competitive. So it was always a bit of a struggle to bump this keyword up to page 1. But the actual category itself, with the work that was being done on it, I think it was ranking for. This was back when analytics showed you all the keywords you were ranking for, and it was ranking for something like 11,000 different keywords.
Yeah.
And that had and the traffic to the site overall had gone up somewhere between 50 and 100%. Revenue had skyrocketed. This category was doing really well, but they kept going on about this one keyword. Yeah, but we want to rank for this. It's like, yeah, but just ranking for that one keyword isn't going to make a huge amount of difference to your traffic. Not as much as you've seen already from these 11,000 other variations. But they just couldn't get it. It's like it's a vanity keyword, really.
Yes.
Just wanted to kind of say, we're on page 1 or we're in the top 3 for this.
Yes.
But it's not about one keyword. I still always say it's worth tracking rankings because it's good to see the trends of how things are going. If you see drop-offs in all your keywords, then you can start to dig into why that's happening. If you see kind of, boosts in all your keywords, you can start to look at, well, is this across my whole site? Is it just across certain categories? So I still think there's value in tracking things, but I certainly wouldn't worry about singular keywords. So, we need to get to page, the top 3 or page 1 for this keyword, because aiming for that is good, yes. But I would worry more about, okay, we're aiming for this keyword. This is our primary optimization keyword. We've got these secondary things we want to talk about on the page as well, these other keywords and topics. But we're just worried about organic traffic to this page. How is that doing? How many keywords are we driving to this page? Is that going up in Search Console? So there's things to think about there. But yeah, no, it's I've seen a number of examples of that kind of vanity, worrying about vanity keywords, and it's the wrong way to go about it, especially these days.
Yeah, it's incredible how often the owner of a business or the senior management of a business will get fixated on a keyword, which is of absolutely no value to them. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's always the wrong keyword. Do you know what I mean? We want to be top 4, this particular thing. And it's like, okay, well, good. Well, nobody's searching for that thing, so it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The thing is, if you do get there, like, there is so much value. Well, I don't know, is there so much value anymore? But this is so valuable and so competitive that the black hat methods don't need to be limited to what you do on your site. it could extend to what you do to other people's sites. So, for example, if you were to put viruses on their sites, or you were to send spam from their domains, or you were to start sending really disgusting, filthy, nasty links to their sites, or you were managed to attack their servers. So, at that level, it gets really quite nasty, I think.
Yeah, and so negative SEO is completely immoral, but it is still a thing, unfortunately. But I think Google deal with it better these days, and I think that's one of the reasons they did this update with Penguin 4 and started ignoring links instead of penalising everyone. Because
Yeah,
I think what was happening more and more was people were just hammering competitors with really spammy links, getting them banned from the search results. They're having to then go through a whole disavow process,
yep,
do a reconsideration request, get back into search. By that time, they've lost who knows how much money. So with Google ignoring links, it gets around that a little bit. So if there's suddenly this influx of unnatural links, you're not necessarily going to get banned or de-indexed because Google, in theory, might ignore those links. Now, unfortunately, I have still seen examples of negative SEO where that doesn't happen. It still works, and they still suffer because of it.
yeah.
But I think it does happen less. But yeah, unfortunately, that's a good example of black hat where negative SEO or hammering their servers and stuff like that. It's unfortunate it happens, but sometimes it does. But yeah, I think it happens less just because some things have been done to make it less effective. But that's never going to be perfect.
Yeah, I had a mate who was a web developer up until about the time you're talking about, around 2007, and then he fell into SEO and he got really good at it, and he made so much money for 4 or 5 of his clients. They were all around the home improvement space. I tell you what they were. They were these like plantation style shutters companies. So it was at a time when that was really fashionable. I don't know if it still is, but he literally had his clients in like first, second, third position on Google for like all these hundreds of keywords, and he would just kind of move it around. If he had a meeting coming up with a particular client, so he was driving it that well. I don't know that he was doing exactly that. I wouldn't want to get into trouble if somebody saw this who sells shutters and said, "This is what you were doing." I don't know if he was doing that, but he had his clients in first, second, third position consistently. He was the most stressed person I knew because he was saying, like, I'm between Google, who really don't give a shit about me, and all of these people that I've made all of these millions of pounds and dollars for. Like, they were off to live in the Cayman Islands because they were making so much money. And 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 it's such a fine balance. I can only influence what goes on with Google. I'm not in control of it. And basically, I've made these people into multimillionaires. So basically, he was just waiting to get sued if it went wrong. And he was always sailing on that line. Do you know what I mean? Where he had to sail close to the wind to keep them where they needed to be. But the danger was at any time he could slip across the line and the wheels come off completely. So I don't know why I'm struggling to ask you questions
that
today.
was back that was back when it was easier to control as well. So
Yeah,
I'm
so
not
this
saying
was
it was easy to control, but it was easier to influence back then.
it was so much less competitive. Like, how many websites were there then compared to how many there are now? How driven were people then to compare to how driven are they now? I think it was around 2014, 2015 that he just ditched the whole thing. He'd made a lot of money, he was fine, but he just ditched the whole thing because it's like I am basically between a rock and a hard place all day, every day. So I think the reason I tell people about that is because I'm so sick of people talking about SEO being free. Like, if you ask people what SEO is, the word free will come out of their mouth at some point in the first minute that they're answering the question. It's free leads or it's free whatever it is. It's not free. It's nothing like free.
No,
Question
absolutely
mark.
not. It's yeah. No, it's so so it was easier to influence back there because, like you say, like the competition was less. A lot of the people ranking weren't even doing SEO, so all you had to do was something to optimize. Whether that's just making sure keywords are in the right place, maybe even keyword stuffing when that was a bit easier,
Yeah.
and you could rank a lot easier. And you probably could get away with tweaking things between different clients and moving people around. These days, obviously, algorithms work a lot different, and it's not only is it a lot harder to rank in general, but there's just a lot more. There's a lot more elements to it, and quality is such a factor these days.
Yeah, I think quality is probably the factor and the biggest difference. But sometimes it happens where I don't speak to clients. I'm not interested in having clients really anymore. But if occasionally I might speak to a client or I have a client and what's at the top is absolute dross. And sometimes it's really hard to move it. So that's not the point. The other thing I want to say is that there really is only one position. You have to be in first place. Because if you're in second or third place, you get a fraction of that traffic and a fraction of those conversions. So, yeah.
Yeah, yes, but don't forget about these kind of potential thousands of other keywords as well. So if you
Yes.
look at what keywords are ranking for a page, it's never just one. If it is ranking, it's
Yeah.
it might be 100, it might be 1,000, it might be more. So there's that to think about as well. I'll give you an example. So I always say to people, it would be great if we could hit top 3 with this. Once you start getting below that, things start to drop off a bit. But again, it depends on that SERP layout. If you've got 4 page results and a map pack and a featured snippet and something else and some images, and the organic results are actually 3/4 of the way down the page, then actually even position 1 isn't that great. So there's other things to think about as well. But an example for you. So I was working with a client, and they had for their main keywords, they had a main category on their e-commerce site. For their main keyword on that main category, they were having massive conflict issues. So what this is, it's when multiple pages on the site, or 2 or more, are optimized for the same term, and Google's not really sure what to rank. So they drag them down. They end up struggling and kind of competing against each other and conflicting against each other. And more often than not, they drag each other down. So I've seen examples of sites like this where they've got loads of stuff ranking on page 2. But actually, when you look, they've got 2 results on page 2, and it's because they're just conflicting against each other. Now, I started working with this client, and one of the big things I wanted to do was work on this conflict issue because it was a massive category for them. And we were doing things like tweaking the content of other pages so it's not so directly optimized for the same term, amending internal links and making sure that anchor text being used was using the right terms to the right pages, because there was a bit of conflict there. So sometimes this keyword was being used, but to point to another page, the wrong page. So, and we did some stuff with backlinks. So there were these different elements. Internal linking was a big part of that. And it took a while. It took about 6 months maybe. But, I can show you a graph of this where it kind of ticks along and then it just bolts up where the conflict issues are resolved. And it hit kind of position, it was in the top 5. And it was bouncing around a bit in the top 5. It hit position 1 sometimes. And now it's quite volatile search results. So it bounces around on page 1. But even with it bouncing around on page 1, because those conflict issues have been resolved, it's not just helped that one keyword, it's helped a load of other variations and similar keywords as well. So the traffic for that one category has shot up. The revenue for that category has shot up. So even though they're not always in the top 3, or certainly not position 1 for that term, that page is doing so, that category is doing so much better. So there's that to think about as well. And that goes back to that not worrying about one keyword, because there's other things at play as well and other things that can influence the traffic.
Yes. No, 100%. And I think, okay, so I think you're right. So that Google are pushing the natural results further and further down the page. which is an issue. I also think that there are industries where you shouldn't even think about search engine optimization for a second. So I'm thinking about hospitality, for example, where Booking.com and TripAdvisor and four or five of those have got it all sewn up, and you are never going to outrank them. Um, I don't know why I'm struggling to come up with questions for you today. I've just got these statements. I don't
So
know.
I think there's a few things to think about there. I always talk to clients about creating content for different parts of the sales funnel. So you know, I come across some sites and I start working with people, and all they've got is that kind of bottom funnel content. So categories and just stuff about what they do, especially when I work with like tech businesses, and they've just got stuff about what they do, nothing else. And I was like, I always say, what about that kind of higher level content? So the awareness content. So they're your target customer, but they're not sure. They're not even necessarily aware of your solution, let alone considering it yet. But there's content that you can write about how to resolve this issue, how to do this, how to do that, that would bring them in and potentially make them aware of this solution. And then there's consideration type content, which is the level below, which will talk more about or talk more to the people who are aware of that solution, but they're just thinking about it. They're not sure what to go for. So you might have this versus that, or what's the best type of X, or the best solution for X, or what's an alternative to this. So there's all these other levels of content as well. So there are going to be businesses where you think, again, going back to just singular keywords, I am not going to try and rank for cheap flights, because that is sewn up by certain sites. You look at page one; they're all massive brands. You're really going to struggle to rank for something like that. But that's not to say that you can't niche down, whether that's by location or types of people or types of holiday, and start trying to compete in those areas. You could start building some of that higher level content. So the more of the awareness content. So how do I don't know, I'm making this up completely off the top of my head. How do I arrange a holiday, a trekking holiday in X country? And you might have the solution for the flights and the tour guide and this and that. But they're not aware of that yet, and they're not even aware of your brand. But that brings them into your site. So I think there's other ways to bring people into your site without necessarily competing for those singular high-level terms. So I think a kind of key thing is always choose your battles. So if you're already a big brand with a good backlink profile and a great site and loads of content, there's going to be a lot more you can compete on. If you're new to the market, then you need to choose your battles and start looking at higher funnel level, really low competitive stuff, and start there. And that's not to say you can't create pages around those other higher level things anyway, but don't start thinking about SEO for those, because you're not going to go in with a brand new site and start competing for cheap flights or hotels in London.
Yeah. And this is what I tell people. So I'm glad you're confirming this for me. Is what you need to do is aim for the lowest hanging fruit. So in the first instance, that will be the long tail phrases, and what you do, like you've alluded to, Search Console, is you look at what you're ranking for best, what you're ranking highest for already, and you invest in that and move that up. And then what happens is you get the halo effect, where because it's being found for that and you're getting good engagement, then Google, shines some more light on you. So that makes perfect sense. Are you ready for a challenging question?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so this is an actual question. So few people, or so many people, know so little about search engine optimization that search engine optimization agencies get away with not actually doing the work, just telling their clients they wouldn't possibly understand what was going on, and there's nothing to see here. It's all going on in the back end, and you just wait for 3 months. I'll wait for another 3 months, wait for another 3 months, wait for another 3 months. Oh, it's been a year and nothing very much has happened. And then you go on. So I think if there is I think search engine optimization is the shadiest part of marketing, because they can hide behind this smoke and mirrors and, it's fairy dust that we're doing here. You couldn't possibly understand. Don't ask too many questions, go away. Is that still as prevalent? Like, I haven't been competing for this stuff in like the last 6-7 years, so I wouldn't know. Is that still as prevalent? And how do clients make sure they're working with an agency that is actually doing the work and going to deliver some benefit at some point?
So I think there's a couple of parts. Yes, it still happens, and I've seen it with prospects I talk to, and I'll give you a couple of examples in a minute as well. But the other thing you also see, especially when people are more price conscious, and they say, and I've had it before, where I say, I can do X, Y, Z. It's going to cost this much, and they say, oh, but I can get it cheaper on Upwork. And I say, well, okay, but like the stuff that they say they're going to do on Upwork is sometimes almost going back to those black hat days. And I still see people on Upwork saying, oh, we only use white hat tactics. We do bookmarking submissions. We do article spinning. We do article syndication. We do this, we do that. And I think that's never been white hat. How is that white hat these days? And it just doesn't work. But people, and this is where the lack of understanding is a problem. People who don't understand it, that just dive in and see, I've got examples of where I've ranked sites, and they kind of fall for that thing. But when you look at it, it's like a completely irrelevant terms in some village that anyone could rank for. You see some terrible examples sometimes. And then you look at what they're actually offering, and it's all these really shady tactics. So there's that part of it where people fall into the trap of just using people who are just offering absolute rubbish. And then 6 months, 12 months down the line, they think, oh God, why did I do that? It's not making any difference whatsoever. Or worst case scenario, it's actually hurting me. So there's that. But then there's also agencies, even in UK, US, where yes, they're not transparent enough. And I still see that with people I talk to. So an example, the one I was talking about, who were having the conflict issues, they were working with an agency. And when I spoke to this company, first of all, I said, you clearly got conflict here. What are they doing about that? And they said, oh yeah, they did notice that a while back, and they say they've been working on it, but it's been a year and nothing's happened. And I said, well, what have they been doing to work on it? Don't know. And what else have they been doing? Don't know. I think they've been building some links. I know they've done this. And I don't think a lot of agencies are transparent enough and actually talk about what they're doing. I had a friend recently saying to me, I've started using this SEO person. I've just had this video report from them. I'm paying them this much. Can you have a look at it and tell me if the report looks okay? And they paid. I mean, it wasn't kind of big agency money, because it was a freelancer, but it wasn't a small amount of money. And I looked at this video. It's a 5-minute video, and all they'd really done is added some WordPress plugins. And they'd spoken about how they'd used Yoast to optimize all of the pages. Well, Yoast does it all in one go, most of the time, unless you do some manual bits, which it didn't look like they'd done. And I've helped to optimize speed, because it's really important for SEO. Again, all they've done is installed a plugin. So they'd installed like 3 plugins, and that was the whole report. And I said they've done like half an hour's work there. So there's also that, they were doing a lot of stuff in that video where they were trying to just use a lot of jargon and make it sound like they'd done a lot. Whereas actually anyone who knows what they're talking about, looking at that video, can see that they've done half an hour's work, if that, and actually they're just trying to baffle people with jargon.
Yes.
Another example I've got is someone I started working with, an e-commerce site. Their backlink profile was going up and up and up, but their traffic, the keywords they were ranking for, was going down and down and down. And when you actually had a dig into the keywords that were being built, all of the anchor text, so the words in the links being used in the backlinks, were like Hannah and Ellie or something like that. There were like 2 names, and it was comment spam. all they were doing for backlinks was they were just creating comments using a name like Anna, and then that would link back to their website, and then they just have some jargon comment there, and that's all they were building. So the links were going up, and they were saying, "Oh, we're doing link building for you," and look, the links are going up. The traffic was just falling and falling. So there's sometimes people, even big agencies, I've seen it with, aren't being transparent enough and aren't doing enough to kind of warrant the fees they're asking for. But at the same time, on the flip side of that, it isn't cheap to do SEO, because there's so many elements, even things like content. Whether you're creating content for your own website, or creating content for guest posting, or creating kind of high level content for digital PR pieces, it's expensive. If you want good writers and good quality content and graphics and things like that, it's not cheap, and that's only one part of it. So there are costs involved, and so if you think you're going to get SEO services for a couple of £100 a month, you've really got to question what's being done, because unless that freelancer or whoever that is writing all of the content themselves and it's really good quality, they're doing all the outreach themselves, they're doing everything themselves, in which case they'd probably be on about £1 an hour. Then you've got to question kind of what they're doing for that, and that's when I think people need to be more transparent and start looking at these reports. And I think when, like in that example, that friend that came to me and said, "Can you look at this report?" I think if you're not sure whether you're getting good quality service, you probably need to go to someone who knows what they're talking about and just say, "Look, I've had this report. Can you just look over this for me?" And quite often the response might be, "Okay, the report looks okay, but you really need to find out a bit more about what they're doing, because it doesn't really say much there," because often reports like that are lacking.
Yes. I 100% think that. I've got an SEO client. I've had this SEO client for about 12 years. So we're very much in a maintenance situation, and it all ticks along very nicely. And what was the point about that? The point about that was, I think the myth, the narrative persists that this is a dark, what annoys me about marketing is that everyone talks about the secret of marketing, and the I don't know, it's like everyone's looking for a silver bullet. Do you know what I mean? Because that's kind of the narrative that persists. Yeah. Like, if I knew this one thing, or if I did this one thing, then actually my marketing would be much more successful. And I think that's even concentrated in search engine optimization, because it's like there is this dark art, or there is this magic, or there is this secret to it. And that has created this situation where agencies, excuse me, where agencies can hide and just say, "Well, you couldn't possibly understand this dark stuff that we're doing, so we're not going to tell you." And I think what I do with this customer, the reason I've had them for 12 years or whatever it is because every month they get a report, and these are the keywords we're targeting, and this is the ranking, and this is the rankings over the last 12 months, and this is the direction they're going in, and this is the number of phrases that we're ranking for, and so it's all laid out. They never look at it, but when he phones me up and says, "You haven't been doing any work," I could say, "I've sent you a report every month. Go and see what's been happening." It's kind of that needs to happen. But people want to fall for it. I went on a pitch once, and the guy said to me, "You know what, Martin? You will slide much further on bullshit than you will on glass." So he was essentially saying, "Lie to me." Do you know what I mean? Everyone else who goes in lies. So he's essentially saying, "Lie to me." What's the question? The question is, I can only think of swear words. What do we do about this? I suppose we do this kind of stuff so people understand actually what goes on. And people need to understand maybe the risks of it. The risks are probably more of a concern than the benefits. So like with my client, it's been 12 years we've been building this thing. We have something valuable. Like, the first priority is, let's not break this thing that we have, So do people understand that there's a risk to this?
Sometimes and sometimes not. What I would say to people is try and be wary about people trying to baffle you with technical jargon and advanced tactics and things like that. Something I always say to people is you can read, you can find blog posts all day long on Google about 12 advanced SEO tactics that will get you, X amount of traffic overnight and all this kind of stuff. And yet a lot of those people that are worrying about advanced tactics or even new stuff that comes on the horizon, like core web vitals and things like that, was a big thing recently. And people started diving headfirst into core web vitals. We've got to speed up our site. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. And it's like, well, it's like you say, it's not a silver bullet. You haven't even got the basics right yet. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. And even when listening to pitches from agencies, if you haven't got the basics right, and an agency aren't talking about, look, let's get the basics right first, and all they're talking about is, advanced tactics and trying to baffle you with jargon, then that's a red flag to me. And people should be thinking, no, hold on a minute, like, there's a lot we need to be doing first, rather than all this kind of advanced technical stuff. Actually, we haven't spent any time on this. We haven't got the basics right. So I think I always say to people, basics, site-wide title tags, meta descriptions, not for necessarily for an SEO thing, but more for clickability. H1s, URLs, like you mentioned, site structure, architecture, internal linking, content, massive. Is your content good enough? And then backlink audit. So is your backlink profile good enough? What needs to be done there? Are you competing in terms of backlinks? So there's all this kind of just the basics before you start diving into, we're gonna kind of look at your core web vitals, and we're gonna do these advanced tactics, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do that. I think people sometimes fall for that jargon just because it sounds complicated and it sounds like people are going to do something fancy. And just sliding on bullshit, like you say.
I think people really want to believe that if they just did this one thing, like the reason they're not being successful is because they haven't been lucky enough to hit on this one thing that they have to do, and they want to believe that's true. So when somebody comes up and says, oh yeah, I can have you top in 20 minutes for that phrase, that one phrase that isn't probably even useful, people want to believe it and they will pay that money to do it. And I think
that's one of the problems, isn't it? Is people have often had a bad experience.
Yep.
So sometimes if someone's offered them a service, they think, oh, that sounds great, and they might have gone with it because it was cheaper. They might have gone with it because it was a referral from a friend, or just it's someone they know, but it's not working.
Yeah.
And it might just be that yes, they're trying to do the basics, they're just not doing it well or not doing enough of it. They then go to someone else and they start baffling them with all this fancy stuff, and they think that's more like it. We haven't done any of this yet. Let's try that. And actually, you haven't got the basics right yet. So I think that's a big problem.
So this is what I do when I teach people: is I will get to the end of the session. I'll say, okay, now you guys are qualified to judge at least if SEO is happening. Who's using an SEO agency? Someone will put up their hands. Do you want to know if these people have done absolutely anything? Yes, we do. And you literally go to their site. The keywords aren't in the page titles, or the keyword research hasn't even been done. The keywords aren't relevant. It's not in the page titles. It's not in the domain. It's not in the URL. It's not in the page titles. It's not in the headers. It's not in the text. It's not in the... So literally, like the very basic 6-7 places you should put your keywords aren't there. So it's just that tiny little bit of education which would qualify everyone to know actually are they getting a reasonable deal or not. And what also astounds me is when you do those basics, the uplift you can get, the progress you can make, because so few people actually seem to be doing the basics. Do you know what? Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. So the amount of sites I come across, and they're working with someone or an agency or something like that, and you look at some basics like their content or their title tag, and you think, God, this is garbage. Like half of this hasn't been looked at. So you wonder what they're doing. Maybe they're just focusing on link building. I don't know. But like I say, that offsite and onsite's got to work together.
100%.
Or you're going to struggle. So
yeah. And so what do I want to say about that? I think maybe some of these people who run these agencies really believe it's the advanced tactics that work. They also get carried along on that little story that if they
Mm.
do you know what I mean? If they just do the very advanced stuff, they read the very advanced stuff and they implement the very advanced stuff, and the very basic stuff gets forgotten or lost or just doesn't happen. Links. You're only supposed to have
Yeah.
natural links. So I say to my groups, they're the kind of links that come to you when you're running naked through the forest, because that's nature. That's what's natural. But those links don't come to you when you're running naked through the forest. Where do
No,
links come from?
no. So Google spokespeople have a habit of saying, "Oh, just build great content." Like, and
Yes.
links will come naturally. And anyone in marketing knows that that isn't the case. You rarely just build great content, let it sit there, and people just find it and start linking to it. So, and in theory, anything beyond that isn't strictly within Google's guidelines, but everyone has to do marketing. Everyone has to do outreach of some sort. So whether it's digital PR campaigns where you're advising people or telling people about some great quality content on your site or giving them exclusive access to it, however you're working that campaign, you're doing that outreach. You might not necessarily be direct about a link, but more often than not, the reason you're doing it is for that link.
Yes.
And even with things like guest posting, I think guest posting is still a great tactic. Now, the only problem with it is
People want money.
that you sometimes have control over the anchor, not to have any control over that. And yeah, and sometimes people want money. So sometimes they're happy to take content, put it up for free. Sometimes they want money. All your competitors are still paying those if it's the right link. If they come across a site that they've said, "Oh, can we guest post on your site?" There's nothing wrong with guest posting. Guest posting is just marketing, especially if it's a site with traffic that you could potentially get referral traffic from. That's nothing to do with SEO. Then that's great marketing, right? So you still want to be doing this sort of thing, but often guest posting is for SEO purposes, and whether it's a branded link or whether it's a keyword link, sometimes you might have control over those anchors. It's still a great tactic. It still works. People still pay for links. If you if you come across a site, it's a great quality site, but they say, I want X amount. I wouldn't turn my nose up at it because everyone's doing it. And, sometimes whether it's to get people to write the content for you and you're paying a writer's fee, or whether it's just a fee for them for the pleasure of having, your content on their site, you are going to have to pay for things. But what I would say, if you do have control over the anchors, these days, just be careful about what anchors you use. So a natural link profile for a site would always be really heavy on branded. So before you do anything, check your current backlink profile, make sure you're really heavy on branded and you haven't just got keyword anchors coming in. And then if you do have control over any anchors that you're building to certain pages, just always vary them. So don't just think, right, I'm going to hammer this one with this keyword because that's what I want to rank for. You might use that for one or two maybe, but be careful about overuse of exact match anchors because I've seen that go against people quite a lot.
Yeah, so it has to look natural. It has to look like it was a link that came to you while you were running through the woods naked.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's loads of back link building tactics. I mean, like guest posting. The more white hat way is digital PR these days. There's broken link building where it's more of a route in really, where you might find a resource page and you say, hey, we've noticed this link is broken. Actually, we've got a resource which is similar to this. Do you want to put that on there instead? There's all these different tactics you can use. But again, you can find posts with 900 link building tactics that you can try today. But you want to find some that work well in your industry and just kind of stick with those. But you are probably, if you want to compete, you are probably going to be venturing into that grey area sometimes.
Yeah, well, this is the big thing, isn't it? This is what Google will want us to say about all links is you can't pay for them. But sometimes I think Google is working too hard to change the world. I'll give you an example. So now we might join an association for a link, because they give us a link as
Mm.
part of that deal. We are paying for that link. So is Google telling us that we are not allowed to join that association or we're not allowed to pay them money? That's not right. I mean,
Well,
that's
they're saying they want you to have a rel sponsored or no follow attribute on that pointed to your site, but you don't have control over that. It's not your site.
no,
So,
exactly.
if you want to join that association, they link to you. As far as I'm concerned, that's a natural link because you're joining that. So, yeah, okay, you're doing it for the link, possibly, but you
But
might
maybe
not
we're
be.
not
You might
doing it
just
for the
want to
link.
join
So
that. So, yeah, exactly,
yeah, so
exactly.
we've been members of the, I don't know, the Aluminium Association for the last 120 years. Must we now stop paying them that money because they're providing a
Yeah,
link as part of that
exactly.
service? That's insane. And then what's the other thing? The other thing is, can I tell you a secret that you're not going to enjoy at all? I don't
Okay.
I don't really believe in algorithms. I don't believe that there is some clever artificial intelligence, machine learning, something going on. I think what happens is that Google are evolving their search engine to prevent people from gaming it because they have a commercial. That's all I believe it is. Call me a conspiracy theorist if you like. That's what I believe. It astounds me actually when you start making the right investments in search engine optimization, how easy sometimes it can be. I've never actually competed for mobile phones. I'm not talking about that. But sometimes just doing the basics and doing sensible things, I think, works. This thing about paying for links is, if you think about it too much, you'll get a headache. But what difference does it make to Google who's top? Do you know what I mean? As long as it's relevant, what real difference does it make to them? And I would argue the people who are investing the most in being at the top of the search engines are either monumentally stupid because there's no value in being there unless you can actually deliver some value associated with that, or they are the people who are investing most in their businesses. So it gets a bit meta and it hurts my head. I don't really want to talk about it, but I don't believe there is this all-powerful, all-knowing, well, there is an all-knowing and it is all-seeing. They do know everything about us. But I don't believe there's this very clever algorithm thing going on. Like, I'm talking to you about this being like the darkest aspect of marketing, the deepest, darkest secret. Google produce a SEO optimization guide every 2-3 years. Do you know what I mean? It's not like it's not there and available. It's not like Google aren't telling us exactly how, if you want to rank, how you should rank. So I don't know what the question is there. I
I
believe.
don't
I
think
think
it's
that
necessarily as smart as people think.
no.
So, it has got better, and the quality of search results are sometimes, not always, but sometimes better. But part of that is more often than not, they're ranking big brands. How do
Yes.
they tell what's a big brand? Well, maybe it's a site with huge amounts of branded backlinks.
Yes.
Well, some of those they might have paid for, some of those they might have not.
Yeah.
But if they can see actually, there's a lot of branded links coming in from good sources, this is obviously a big brand. That's why, a lot of people don't like this, but a lot of big brands have been favored in search results in more recent years.
Booking.com,
Fact.
TripAdvisor,
Yeah,
they are
exactly.
big
So it's
clients
harder
of
for small guys
Google.
to compete.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's like, the small guys, it's harder to, they can still compete. They just need to think about it in a different way and not compete for things like cheap flights or, hotels and things like that. So there's, I don't think it's as smart as some people think it is. And a couple of examples of this. So one is like EAT. So was it expert authoritativeness and trustworthiness?
Yeah.
Is some people think that's part of the algorithm. Some people think they would love it to be part of the algorithm. It's just not. But if you think about it, there isn't really a way that Google can tell, okay, this name that's the author, that's actually a doctor who's got 20 years experience and he's an expert on this subject matter. They can't do that with an algorithm.
No.
So I think maybe they are trying to eat elements into the algorithm, and they would love for it to be a big part of it, but they can't necessarily do that. So I think people are just trying to cover themselves, and make sure they have got experts writing about things. And there have been examples where going down that road helps, but a lot of that just can't be algorithmically done.
Yeah.
Another example is there was a guy recently, who he does a lot of testing. So someone who's known in the SEO space, he does a lot of testing, and he managed to get not for a hugely competitive term, but for kind of local results, he managed to get a page ranking with lorem ipsum. He just wanted to prove that Google's algorithm isn't as smart as people think it is. So he got a page ranking with lorem ipsum, and he just peppered the keyword in this lorem ipsum. And then he also managed to get a page ranking with cloaking. So it's a blank page, and the text was hidden. Something that shouldn't work these days. And he managed to get that ranking as well. So, it's a lot smarter than it was 10 years ago, but it's far from perfect, and I don't think it's as smart as some people think. That's not to say you should cloak keywords and have lorem ipsum on your page and just like try and game the system, but
they will smite you if they. Yeah, so that's the thing about my God analogy, is that they will smite you. They are spiteful and pernicious, and they will strike you down if they catch you. If they catch you catching them out, you're bang in trouble with Google, is the truth.
Yeah. Like on the flip side of those examples, I've seen a lot of examples of over optimization. So examples where stuff's mentioned on the page too much, and something's struggling to rank. And then people have used a tool like Surfer. I don't know if you've used Surfer SEO,
No.
but it's a content editor. Well, they've got some other kind of auditing tools, but it's a content editor. And they use Google APIs and scrapes of what's already ranking. They combine all that data, and they look at, based on everything that's ranking, this is probably the sort of length of content you should be going for if you want to rank for this term.
Yeah.
These are the terms and topics you should be talking about. These are the sort of headings you should be having. So they might use something like that and realize, actually, do you know what? Everyone else is talking about this term or topic X amount of times. I'm talking about it 5 more times than that. Maybe I've gone a bit over the top with this. They've started dumbing it down and removing some of the irrelevant stuff, keeping some of the key content in there. And they've actually seen boosts because it's over optimized. And it's the same with just simple elements like title tags, too much cramming keywords in, and then they dumb it down. And not only does it help from an SEO perspective, but it also probably makes it a bit more clickable from search results, arguably a ranking factor in itself. So, there's that flip side. Again, it doesn't have to be that smart. They can, and their algorithm, if you want to call it that, or whatever it is, their system can easily pick up if you're over optimizing.
Yes.
But again, not necessarily as smart as some people think it might be, but it's something else to think about. Don't go stuffing keywords in because you think, oh, maybe Google is not as smart as we think, because it's going to, it goes the other way as well.
100%. But I think what people forget is that also Google Analytics is plugged into 95% of websites. So they know what people are clicking on. They know how many pages, they know how much time people spend on the sites, how many pages they click on. So they do know, without having to be particularly clever, which are the best performing pages for the keywords. So if they, they know. Do you know what I mean? They know. They don't have to be that clever. It doesn't have to be. It's not some...
Chrome as well. How many people are using Chrome?
Yes. And email.
Google's
so this
well.
is, we didn't speak about Hummingbird. So Hummingbird was when they came out and said, our AI now knows more about you than you do. And it's no like you know more about us where you do, because now we've started signing up for Maps, we've started signing up for YouTube, we've started signing up for Gmail. So you're reading our mails. So, it's all much more, it's much less mysterious and magical than Google would have us believe, I think. And if you do the right things and sensible things and you stay on top of what's going on, I don't think search engine optimization is tremendously... It's very competitive. Depends how competitive it is, I suppose. But it's not the black art that they would have you believe, these agencies that don't really want to do any work.
No, like we said before, start with the basics and choose your battles. I think are key things there.
Yes, 100%. I think that is the best advice. We've been talking for an hour and 20 minutes already.
Have we? Wow.
Yeah. So we've got to the end of the time that you committed to. Man, thank you so much. I love these conversations, partly because who can you talk to about these things? It's like you can't phone up Google and say, I've got an issue with my search engine optimization. They'll tell you where to go, you know? So thank you so much for your time. This has been really useful. I think we kind of answered the questions. We definitely know that you're qualified. We get a sense of what you're doing and who you're doing it for. My recommendation to anyone who's going to invest in this is to give you a call. So the only two questions remaining are, what should people read? And is there anyone you know who might be interested to have a conversation like this with me?
With what should people read, I think it very much depends what level you're at. I think you mentioned at the beginning, I've got a book. That's more for people who want to get a better understanding of what SEO is and how to do it. Yeah. The book is aimed at people with e-commerce businesses, but the content of that book works for anyone with an online business, really. So
Yes.
that's called The Organic Advantage. That's available on Amazon.
Okay. Is the Orgasmic Advantage, is that in the pipeline?
Working on it. But yeah, it's going to be a while. Other things to read, I'd say I'm a big fan of Brian Dean's content. I think he breaks things down really well. The Ahrefs blog is quite good too. And Robbie Richards is another one who does some good content. If you are maybe a slightly higher level and you are looking for a variation of link building tactics and things like that. But certainly if you're starting out, I'd say Brian Dean's a good option.
Fantastic. Okay.
And people to refer. Do they have to know I'm about to do this? Can I drop people in it?
You can drop people right in it, and I do this while we're still recording because if you say something really nice, it might work for the introduction for what might be coming up, kind of a thing.
So I used to work with a guy called Matt Daly, and when I moved to an agency in Brighton, he joined the team. I was head of technical SEO at that agency at the time. And he joined the team just as an SEO executive, I think. So he was just managing clients and running SEO campaigns. He left there and he went on to start an agency with his brother. The agency is called Circulate Digital. And in recent years, they have really scaled that. I can't remember how many people they've got working there now, but they've built up the team to a decent number. They've got an office in the UK and Barcelona. He's living in Barcelona now, working from that office. Still only a young lad, and I'm just really impressed with what they've done in such a short space of time. And I think he'd bring a lot of value to this.
Cool.
So it's worth talking to Matt, I think.
Brilliant. And is there anyone else?
I think that's all I can think of at the moment.
Okay. So what really works? Is there any way that you might be able to do like a LinkedIn invitation, just saying you've done it and you think he might find it useful or interesting?
Yeah, of course.
If you could do that, that really works. Have you found it interesting or useful?
Yeah, definitely. It just flew. That went too quick.
It's cool. And what yeah.
I feel like we had so much more to talk about, but yeah.
Well, I feel like if you want to come back maybe in 3 or 4 or 5 months and have more, I think there is more to talk about. Yeah. But the thing is, I know enough about all these things to be dangerous, and I'm really interested to know more. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's that's how the dynamic works.
Yeah, do you know what? Maybe if I come back on, we're going back to that basics thing. I think it might be valuable if I come back on and talk about quick wins and things like that people should be doing to get results. So maybe I could come on and talk about quick wins and a few things like that. Okay,
that would be really cool. That would be really, really cool. There's only one person who's ever come back, and they just did a "this is everything I do" kind of a thing, which was really cool. Really, really cool. Man, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, been great. Thank you.
Thank you. So what we'll do is we'll do the pretend goodbye now for anyone who's watching, and then I'll stop recording. Then we'll say goodbye like normal human beings.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. So thank you so much for your time. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.